Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this regularly scheduled Ways and Means Committee. I'm Councilmember Abdi Wassami, Chair of the committee, and with me today are Council Members Cunningham, Johnson, and Palmisano, and we have a quorum, and therefore we can conduct the business of the committee. Today we have 26 items on the agenda, on the consent agenda for consideration, and I will read out the consent agenda. Item number, and I will be pulling out item number 22 for discussion, but here's the consent agenda. Item number 1 is a contract amendment with Questions and Solutions Engineering, Inc. for additional consulting services for the Public Service Building Project. Item number 2 is a contract amendment with Technology Management Corporation for additional information technology and audio-visual consulting services for the new Public Service Building. Item number 3 is a contract amendment with ICE Builders, Inc. for change orders and contract closeout regarding the Target Center ICE replacement project. Item number 4 is a bid for the Minneapolis Convention Center terrazzo floor update project. Item number 5 is a bid for Minneapolis Convention Center steam room cooling equipment renovation project. Item number 6 is a bid for the Minneapolis Convention Center meeting room and ballroom wall scone replacement project. Item number 7 is a bid for the Target Center for Protection Anchor project. Item number 8 is a bid for the telecommunications PBX equipment and maintenance. Item number 9 is a gift acceptance for city staff travel expenses to the International Association of Transportation Regulators Annual Conference. Item number 10 is a real estate transactions with the Metropolitan Council for Southwest Light Rail Project. Item number 11 is a contract amendment with Patrick Bourne for professional planning and coordination services. Item number 12 is a contract with SMG for US Bank Stadium traffic control services. Item number 13 is a grant from the Minnesota Department of Health for the Minnesota Expecting and Parenting Student Program. Item number 14 is a contract with CoStar Realty Information, Inc. for access to real estate information database. Item number 15 is a collective bargaining agreement with Teamsters Convention Center Janitors Unit. Item number 16 is another collective bargaining agreement with Machinists Unit 2018 through 2021. Item number 17 is an appointment position in the Minneapolis Police Department. The position is the Director of Public Information. Item number 18 is a contract amendment with Sierra Cedar, Inc. to extend the PeopleSoft module implementation. Item number 19 is a contract with Terminal 4, Inc. to provide and implement a web content management systems. Item number 20 is a gift acceptance for use of space facilities at Metropolitan State University for the Urban Scholars Program. Item number 21 is a grant acceptance from the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, the Metropolitan Council's Tax Base Revitalization Account, and Hennepin County's Environmental Response Fund for the Spring 2018 Brownfield Grant Round. Item number 22 is a 2017 Annual Tax Increment Financing Disclosure Statement. Item number 23 is a contract amendment with Sheehy Construction Company to complete condenser upgrade in ramps A and C. Item number 24 is a contract term notice and amendment with Minnesota Department of Transportation for ABC ramp management. Item number 25 is a bid for revised signal systems, storm sewer and pedestrians curb ramp improvements. And our final item is a receive and file. Item number 26, Staff Purchasing and Joint Powers Letter Report for August 2018. I'm pulling out item 22 for discussion since we have a presentation prepared for us today. I'll move all items for approval except item 22, and we have been joined by Council Member Fletcher and Council Vice President Jenkins. And do any of my colleagues have any questions or any discussions on any of the 26 consent items? Councilmember Fletcher. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't need to pull anything for discussion, but I did just want to make a brief comment on item number 8.
Okay.
I was a little uncomfortable noting that we were accepting the sole bid for a contract this bid, that we only had one bidder. And it turns out that there are market circumstances where with the particular kind of phone technology that we've selected, there's only one, there's a little bit of an exclusive deal for the certification around this phone system. I think that that probably points to a need to relook at that in the future. I don't think that the city should necessarily be getting into contracts with companies that will only make one vendor available to us for service. So I think when this contract is up, it's going to be worth asking that question about what kind of diversity of potential service providers are available on the technologies that we select moving forward. But I'm comfortable moving it forward for today.
All right. Thank you very much, Councilmember Fletcher. Any other questions or queries? Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Rosami. I just have a question on number 11. I don't think we need to have a full discussion on it, but just curious, what is the contract amount that we are extending to one Mr. Patrick Bourne?
Okay, that's a good question. Any of the staff? Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Warsami, Councilmember Jenkins. I don't have with me the amount. I know that we are exercising an option to extend the contract for the final 4, but I can get back to you on the exact amount.
So if I can add something. So we already have a contract with this gentleman?
Yes.
And he worked on what, the Super Bowl?
Super Bowl, yeah.
So now it's an extension.
So it's extending to the final 4,
Yep.
right?
And this was a part of the original contract, was an option to extend into an additional year to contract with them.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. And I'll just look for
So
the
you can
information.
follow up with Council Vice President Jenkins and give her that information,
that would be
how much
great.
your contract is.
I
Okay,
can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. And Councilmember Fletcher.
And then I think Mr. Intermill has a comment too.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Council Vice President, the original contract was not to exceed $250,000, and $90,000 has been spent to date.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Intermill.
So
Councilmember Fletcher.
no need to worry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Busy day behind the scenes, digging around, finding out about some of these consent items. Again, no need to pull it, but I did just want to make a brief public comment on item number 3, because there's been some interest in this over time. I just think it's worth providing context that the City Council did authorize the City Attorney's Office to pursue legal damages. These costs derive from a system that was built that didn't work properly, and so we're paying additional to get to a system that works. So that's in progress. We're not able to comment a lot about it, but I wanted to assure the public that we're not ignoring the additional costs that we're incurring because the system didn't work properly.
All right. Thank you very much, Councilor Fletcher, who brought out 2 important items to look at. Anybody else? Any of my colleagues? Okay. Since there is no further discussion, make a motion to approve all the 26 consent items. All the items except for item 22. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Those against, that has been approved. So now we're going to go to our discussion item, and the first discussion that we have is item number 27, which is a contract with King and Spalding LLP for independent investigation services, authorizing a contract with King Spalding, it's a firm, in the amount of $195,000 to conduct an independent, neutral review of the conduct of the city's police department officers, specifically in connection with instances where emergency medical services were called and then administrated ketamine. And we have somebody from the city staff to open the discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Andrea Larson, Director of Strategic Management in the Coordinator's Office. I apologize, Nuria Rivera-Vandermind, our City Coordinator, planned to be here, but had a family emergency, so wasn't able to be here today. I'll do my best to give an overview and answer questions. Do know that the Coordinator's Office is a neutral holder of the contract, so there are several other folks that have done work on this and may step up to answer questions. As you know, this came before you as a result of a civil rights report on Hennepin County's ketamine usage and MPD's interaction in those circumstances. The mayor's office and MPD stated that they wanted to have an objective party look at MPD's interaction with Hennepin County EMS, and this study was also a recommended action of the civil rights report. The purpose of the contract is to look between 2015 and 2018 at all instances the word ketamine was used in reports and whether or not police conduct relating to that was appropriate. To look at policies, training, and procedures to see if we need to shore up anything related to how we interact with Hennepin County EMS, and to deliver a report with their findings. We expect to have a report by or before the end of the year. And I'm ready to stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay. Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering, since there has already been some work that has been done with King and Spalding, I'm assuming with looking through data, whether or not to take on this project, do we currently owe them any billable hours for what they've already done?
I am not sure. Don't know.
Mr. Chair, Council. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Cunningham. Yes, the initial interaction with King and Spalding was for them to assess the scope of to conduct an initial assessment and to assess the scope of the information, ultimately providing us with the cost to do the full investigation. And that initial engagement was authorized in an amount up to $50,000. And so they have already incurred time potentially in an amount up to that amount.
Thank you for that. If I may, I have.
Yes, go ahead.
So this is just speaking in general, but I just wanted to just voice my concerns to see such an expensive contract, and we're still not talking about victims, and we're still not talking about supporting the victims who, many of whom almost died, being opted into a research project without their consent. So I have some concerns about that, and I also feel like there's still a lot of unanswered questions, such as what is our relationship with the county moving forward? Who will be held accountable for the gross violation of our residents' civil rights? And are there any next steps planned in terms of actually holding anybody accountable and who that would be? What I've really seen is that we haven't talked about this issue as a full package. It's been a little bit piecemeal, and with this particular contract, it's focusing, rightly so, on MPD, but in a lot of ways, the work of the Civil Rights Department already identified that there was a missing policy that said that officers cannot verbally command medical professionals to engage in particular medical needs. And then Mayor Fry and Chief Arredondo immediately enacted said policy in the police department. And then the Office of Police Conduct Review study also recommended for us as city leaders to consider next steps with the county. And so I don't see that reflected here in the project scope. And so in that, I have some concerns that this is addressing a symptom rather than the root cause of this violation. And so beyond just this particular contract, I support the contract because it is helpful to have an outside party when we have this many jurisdictions involved in particular. I have shared that I have some concerns that this undermines our Civil Rights Department and the trustworthiness and the objectivity of them, of the work that they do. They were mandated to do this work by ordinance. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're talking about all of it together, and I will be working with colleagues. I'm committed to working with colleagues so that we can get some justice for our residents, and so something like this doesn't happen again. So just wanted to speak to that, and thank you so much for being here to talk through it last minute.
Thank you, Councilmember Cunningham. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Osami. I also share some of Councilmember Cunningham's expressed concerns, but I'm curious, do we know what the scope of the current contract is?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Jenkins, we do. The Scope of the contract is to look at the last 3 years, 2015 to 2018, anytime the word ketamine has been used in reporting, and whether or not police conduct relating to that situation was appropriate. And then to look at policies, training, and procedures to see if we need to make any changes to ensure that we are acting appropriately with EMS in situations, particularly where ketamine are being used. And so I think a part of that, my understanding, although we can clarify, is to look at that relationship with Hennepin County and further explore and get recommendations on what that should look like.
So potentially it would address some of the concerns that Councilmember Cunningham brought up.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Jenkins, I believe so. I can double check and get back to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Larson.
All right. Thank you, Council President Jenkins. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to put you on the spot. I know you're kind of pinch hitting today for our coordinator. But I am curious, are there areas of the scope of this report that exceed the scope of the report that was already generated out of our Civil Rights Department? Are we getting additional work, or are they just checking the work of the report that we've already received?
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Fletcher, my understanding is that it is additional work on top of what OPCR has already reported on. I welcome anyone here who is more involved with the scope to jump in. That's something I can look into and get more information for you. But my understanding is that it is to go beyond the original report.
Okay, great. And then one additional question is, whose budget is this coming out of? I was unclear on that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Fletcher, this is coming out of MPD's budget.
Out of MPD. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I echo some of the concerns raised, and I think from my standpoint, I'm trying to conceptualize what this will do besides give us, it seems more like it's kind of just a review or double checking the findings that we've already had. And I mean, we've had policy change as a result of this, and it seems like a lot of money for just that double check. Is there something I'm missing related to that? And then I guess I have a question for Mr. Intermill or Ruff about this coming out of MPD's budget, when I am under the understanding that we are over budget for this year, or that we're going to at least have to make up some money for the Super Bowl expenses. And so I'm wondering how that will all work as well.
Intermill.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, so you are correct that MPD, based on current projections, may go over budget, and this was not included in their original budgeting. So then we would be looking to use contingency funds to offset any overage from the police department, just as we would any other department that may go over in the general fund.
Okay. Thank you. And then is there more information on this aspect of, look, we've already done all of this. Is this really $195,000 to essentially double check when we've already made changes? And I guess first off, that if you could answer that question, that'd be great.
Yeah, Chair Warsami, Councilmember Johnson. As I said, I think my understanding is that this is intended to go deeper than the initial report, and also to provide an independent review and independent recommendations. And so from what I know, at the time this was negotiated, there was an urgency to move this forward. I know the Attorney's Office had reached out to several organizations. There are not very many that provide this service specifically, and this was the only vendor that worked within the time frame for us to get this completed. I know it was important to select someone who was not local in order to provide an objective opinion of MPD actions. So I understand that this is intended to be an independent external review as well, and that's one of the values in the contract, in addition to going further than or deeper than the original report.
Thanks. I guess I'm just having trouble conceptualizing what does going deeper than the original report look like. It seemed like the original report was pretty comprehensive to me, or pretty thoughtful.
Sure. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I will have to get back to you on that, having just heard about this morning, actually. That's something I can look into and get back to you on.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments, colleagues? Okay, I had a little comment as well. Given the concerns that the city heard from community about and how much this was played out in the media and the concerns that, our residents had, I think it was very important to have a neutral, independent body look at this. I mean, the Civil Rights Department is still part of the city, and the police are part of the city. So I think it was important that we had a third party. I mean, and I give credit to my colleagues for highlighting the importance of, the fiscal responsibility that we have in terms of spending money and where the money is coming from and the department. But I think it is very important to give confidence to our residents that we are taking this seriously and that they're, just like Councilmember Cunningham echoed, that their welfare and well-being is important, and that police officers are not medically trained individuals who can direct what type of treatment somebody should get. So I think we need to look at it, and it's important to go beyond just our department to make sure that we give confidence to our residents. So that's my thoughts on that. Any further discussion? Okay, since I see no further discussion, I make a motion to approve this item. Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those against? Okay, and that seems to have passed. Go ahead. Roll call? Yeah. All right, thank you. That item passes, and thank you for my colleagues. Now we have the final item, which is item 22 for our discussion. And item 22, as I mentioned earlier, was the 2017 Annual Tax Increment Financing Disclosure Statement. And we have Mr. Mark Winkelhaeg and our CFO, Mark Ruff, to do the presentation. Go ahead, Mr. Winkelhaeg.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. I'm Mark Winkelhaeg, the Director of the Development Finance Division in the Finance Department. As many of you already know, all municipalities and authorities in the state of Minnesota must annually report on their use of tax increment financing. So for the year ending December 31st, 2017, finance staff submitted 94 TIF reports to the state auditor's office. 90 of those were for individual TIF districts, and 4 of them were for pooled debt. Additionally, the attached 2017 annual disclosure statement that's attached to your RCA is being forwarded to the City Council as a receive and file item, and it was sent to the County Board, the County Auditor, and the State Auditor's Office, as well as being published in Finance and Commerce last month. If you scroll down to this report, there's a lot of numbers in it, but I think I'll just mention a few items that sort of jump out. So you can see in the left column, there's the 90 TIF districts that we had to report on in alphabetical order. I should note that of the 90, only 67 are active. And by active, I mean they're actually generating increment every year. The other 23 districts have been terminated, but they still have some money, so we still have to report on them. So any TIF district that has a 0 in that 4th column, captured net tax capacity, that's been terminated or decertified. If you look in the 6th column over tax increment received, you'll see that there's a variety of numbers there. So what that indicates is there are a lot of different sized TIF districts, but the bulk of them, probably 80–85% of them, are small. And by small, I mean they have 1 parcel, 1 building. They generate less than $1 million per year. And there's about 10 of them that are sort of medium-sized, which would be 4, 5, 6 parcels, 3, 4, 5 buildings. And then there's one exceptionally large one, which is the one I'm just going to highlight here briefly. So that's the consolidated district. If you skim down the report, about a third of the way down on the first page, you're going to see a district that sort of stands out from all the others. And if you scan over to the 4th column, the captured net tax capacity, you'll see the number 26,956,000. That's the amount of tax capacity that's captured in this extremely large TIF district, and it equates to about over $2 billion in market value. And so that particular TIF district has well over 4,000 parcels in it, and it is larger than all the other 66 active districts combined. So if you scan a little bit farther over to the right, you'll see that the first year of increment was 2011, and the last year of increment will be 2020, because it has to be decertified at the end of that year. So there's only a couple years left on that big one. And at that point, once that district is decertified, that $2 billion of market value will come out of the district and be added to the city's tax base. And at that point, you'll still have a lot of TIF districts we're reporting on, but the totals will go down to less than half of what you're seeing now. What I'd like to do now then, I should mention, by the way, if you have any questions on any of these individual TIF districts that are in your ward or you're just curious about, just send me an email. We can give you details on each of those. Then what I thought I'd do, as long as I had an opportunity here, is just I grabbed 3 slides from a presentation to try to give you a quick and general overview of where the tax increment financing program has gone in the last 10 or 15 years here in Minneapolis. So you can see the number of active TIF districts was at its largest in 2008 when we had 101 of them, and currently we have 67. So there's been a 34% reduction in the last 10 years, and that is due to the fact that all of these old TIF districts that were established back in the 70s and the 80s and early 90s have reached their maximum duration and have been decertifying over that last 10-year period. So you can see in the lower part of that slide decertifications that have happened in the last 12 years, from 2006 to 2017. We decertified 55 districts. So like I say, all the old 70s, 80s, and early 90s districts are gone now. And during that same time period, we've established 24 new ones. So that's about 2 a year. Of those 24, 19 have been for rental housing projects that have had some level of affordability in them. And then 5 other ones have been for commercial or some other type of property. So the bulk of the districts we've been establishing in the last 10, 12 years have been for rental housing projects. I don't know if you can read the numbers on that chart, but you can get a flavor for where things have gone since 2002. So you can see a steady increase of about 4 districts a year all the way up to 2008. That's when all the decertifications started happening. And at that point, it's just been sort of a general downward slope all the way to our present situation where we have 67. We probably in the future will be decertifying 1 or 2 a year, and however many get created will be a function of how many projects the City Council approves. Then the last slide here is just for kind of background. This is a statistic that got a lot of attention in the early 2000s, and that's the percent of Minneapolis' tax base that's in TIF districts. So you can see from 2002 to 2008 or 9, it was relatively constant at 14.5 or 15.5%, and that received a lot of discussion about whether that was too high, too low, or whatever. But then once we started decertifying districts, we sort of dropped considerably lower. Then there's a couple up and down years. That's when the consolidated TIF district was brought into being. But we've sort of settled in at about 7.5%. That will continue for a couple more years till that big consolidated TIF district is decertified, and then we'll drop down probably below 4. At that point, it's, relatively speaking, historically very low for us. It puts us in the lower section of, if we compare ourselves to comparable cities in the metro area. So that's probably why this particular statistic hasn't received a lot of discussion recently. But with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions when Mr. Ruff is here to assist as well.
Thank you very much. Any questions, my colleagues? I think everybody's fine with the TIF districts. Okay, so I make a motion to receive and file, I believe this is. No, I make a motion to approve the item number 22. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against? Thank you very much. And we have completed our work today, and therefore we are adjourned. Thank you.